we're going to go over understanding the key motivations for why someone would want to run for office, identifying personal and community-focused reasons to want to run, and then developing and refining a powerful narrative that will resonate with voters. So it's one thing to decide to run. It's also another to tell a compelling story about why you're running for office. And then finally, we're going to do a live demo to show you how you can use goodparty.org's tools to help you to make the most of this message, turn it into different types of content, to refine the message itself and apply it to your campaign plan. So without further ado, I want to introduce our expert for today. He is goodparty.org's own political director, Jared Alper. Jared, thank you for being here. Do you want to give a little intro about yourself and what you do here at goodparty.org before we jump in to what we're covering today?
Sure. Thanks, Rob. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We're covering a topic that I think, especially for the folks who are getting ready to get off to the races, it's going to be really informative, and it's the most important time in a campaign for many people who are freshly filed, about to get filed, still in the final decision points of making the determination to run for office. So thank you for joining us tonight. We've got a lot to cover, and I think you'll take a lot away from it. I'm Jared
Yeah.
Alper. I lead the
Okay.
political team at goodparty.org. I've spent my career in the political space. I've been running campaigns for over 10 years now. And I'm sure, like many of you, I was motivated to do the work because I looked at our political system and said, we have to have a better way of solving the country, and tried to tackle the idea of helping our government operate better by, at first, electing people from both parties who were reform minded into different, legislatures. I've run campaigns for offices like the US Senate, US House of Representatives, many, many more local campaigns and state legislative campaigns than that, and found that the only real way to make meaningful change is to change the incentive structure and help independent candidates run. And so I've been with goodparty.org for almost 5 years now. Our organization has grown a ton. We are fresh off of a historic year where we elected over 3,400 independent, people-powered, and anti-corruption candidates across the country. And we're excited to continue on this mission to show people that it's possible to run without a D or an R next to your name, without big money dollars in your back pocket, and without participating in this culture of political chaos and dysfunction that I think has turned so many people off to the idea of public service. So happy to be here tonight to talk all about that, and appreciate those for tuning in on this first of many sessions.
Yeah. And I'll reiterate one more time for those of you who just joined. Feel free to ask questions throughout the session in the chat box, and we'll try to work those into the presentation throughout. We also have a Q&A section at the end, so dedicated time to answer any questions that come up. But why don't we get right into the meat of it? I want to talk about understanding the decision to run. And Jared, maybe a good place to start is naming what a couple of the key factors are when you're considering whether or not you should run for office.
I think, bar none, the biggest consideration, and it's the number one question that candidates, whether you're running for governor or you're running for a city council in a small town, that you're going to get asked as a candidate is, why are you running in the first place? And I think it sounds like a simple question, but it's a pretty complex and important thing for a candidate to really understand about themselves and about their communities before they even make the decision to run, and certainly be able to communicate that really effectively with their constituents and with the people they're meeting on the campaign trail. So if you dissect the question, why are you running for office? We advise candidates all the time to really, take some time, look inward, talk to friends and family, understand your community, and try and piece that together so that people understand not just the things that you would want to do if you're elected, but also your personal values, the decisions that have led you to think that you would be the best choice in any given election, the things that inspired you to run because you see potentially a problem in your community, and also why you're the best and most compelling choice to take the vision that you would be offering people, in contrast to potentially what else is going on in their community. And so that's a really important framework, and we'll get into that throughout the course of this presentation. But the question, why am I running or why are you running, is something that I think candidates really need to take the time in the early stages of their campaign to flesh out, to understand, to ask themselves over and over and over again until it's really, really clear in their own minds what kind of vision they have for their community. And from there, you can then talk about how you explain it to other people and communicate to other people what your rationale and your passion for running is.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot in terms of there's some self-reflection that's necessary. There's uh, being sure to sort of tie the needs to the community. I know that you've been doing this long enough to see some people who really succeeded at sharing their why, and I've seen some folks who have done it the wrong way. You and I used to do a version of GPA where we gave some examples of that and showed it on video. And while we're not going to do that here, I wonder if you can kind of highlight and maybe show just the difference between when someone's able to answer this question well and when somebody maybe has struggled with it. So, what are some examples of a campaign that told its why very succinctly and one that maybe struggled?
Yeah, so I had the privilege of working with over 3, 4 dozen candidates personally last year who were really close to the end of their elections. I spent a lot of time with, and we worked on this a lot because it's a little bit of a sometimes uncomfortable thing to really dive into your sort of personal mission to run. But I think everyone who we worked with, we're coming at it from a place of I know exactly what I kind of want to do, and they had a personal story that we had to refine. So I think of there are a slate of candidates in Fairfax, Virginia, two women in particular named Stacey Hall and Rachel McQuillan, who looked at the state of their community. They had actually been serving in office on their school board, and they saw how well their school board operated in relation to the rest of their community. And their simple motivation for running is we have to be able to operate as independent leaders who are not going to cave to partisan interests. And they looked at their city government and saw that there wasn't really any original ideas. And frankly, there was not a lot of leadership being expressed on their councils. Like one mayor who was just getting rubber stamped to everything that she wanted to do by a very, very partisan, in this case, Democratic city government. And so they made their whole compelling, case to their community around it's really important that we have independent people who are going to do what's best for their community, who believe that good ideas don't come in shades of only blue or red, and who are committed to putting people before, in this case, partisan political interests. And they had success. They were able to really that resonated with people who were looking at a community that they saw maybe a little too cozy with Washington, D.C. It's in the backyard of Washington, and thought it would be really nice if and refreshing to have a change of culture at our local level, where frankly, partisan political interests shouldn't be so involved and pervasive. So that stands out to me as a example of telling your why really effectively because it was very clear to people. And we've had some candidates, especially in my past life, who would lean very heavily into issues only, right? So if someone would say, "Why are you running?" rather than expressing, "I care so much about my community," or I believe that our community is being held in the wrong direction, the answer would be sort of impersonal and very, in a way, like data oriented. Like the cost of healthcare is $1,411 per family per month or something like that. And a person would say, "Well, that sounds like a lot. Why do you care so much about that?" And you'd be like, "It's just expensive." And you'd say, "Okay, but where's the narrative here? Where's the story? How have you been impacted by the costs of healthcare? Do you know people who've been impacted by the costs of healthcare? Have you had medical, debt or conditions that you've had to, or experiences that you've lived, like a lot of people have, that resonate with folks because they're shared and they understand the problem that's complex that is healthcare." And this person would not get past that. They were just very fixated on like cold, ruthless problem solving. And while there's a time and place for being a cold, ruthless problem solver, it doesn't necessarily inspire people right off of the bat. It doesn't necessarily motivate people and say, "Hey, I want to go distribute yard signs for this person or stand out in the cold on election day to canvass for this." So those things side by side sort of illustrate to me that sometimes your why I'm running, it doesn't have to be so in the weeds on any one given issue. It's almost more focused on who you are as a person, the life that you've lived, your values, the things that you care about, how your community has shaped you. Those things that are maybe a little bit more grand, oftentimes are the ones that I think connect with people because they're the easiest to relate to.
Yeah, I'm hearing that a big part of this is connecting the impact on the community to
Yeah,
the actual policy itself.
that's
Explaining whether you have a personal tie to it or not, talking about the way that it actually impacts the community, because that makes them understand the fundamental choice that they're making when they vote for you instead of someone else. Do you have any other tips for how the needs of the community can align with your personal goals for running?
Yeah, the tip that we always encourage candidates to do, especially if you haven't yet sort of formally declared that you're running, is to go out into your community and really solicit feedback. I think that candidates sometimes get really deep into the weeds, and it makes a lot of sense that they would around what they're going to do, and it's my campaign, and these are the things that I care about, or maybe that their friends and their family are telling them in their ear are the most important issues. And I think sometimes if you force yourself out of maybe your inner circle and ask some simple questions, you'll challenge some of the assumptions that you've made and learn a lot about your community and its diversity or the things that are top of people's minds. And that'll help shape, even how you would answer the question why you're running. And I've seen this happen where, candidates will come to us and say, my biggest issues are education, or healthcare or something, foreign policy related, which sometimes is not applicable, especially at the local level. But candidates, that's they watch the news and that's what their opinion is being shaped by sometimes. And then they go out to a coffee shop and it turns out that the people in their community, they care about, the streets being paved and potholes being filled and being able to walk their kids safely to school. And so the candidate who does that and gets the feedback from their community that these are the things that enough people are telling you or the things that they're talking about with their friends and family and around their living room table or kitchen table, the candidate who ingests that and understands that and makes that a part of their why is going to be the candidate I think that overwhelmingly has success because they're reflecting what the community wants and they've done the work to understand that versus the candidate who thinks, and doesn't do that work and makes assumptions that they never get to test.
I think an added benefit of that too is you get to hear how the community talks about these issues. And you can tie that into the language that you use to talk about these issues. There can be a disconnect sometime between policy and the way that voters really understand what you're trying to do. So being able to speak the same language starts with actually listening to the language that your voters are speaking. Kind of the last thing I wanted to ask in this section about the decision to run is how candidates can evaluate both their motivation and their readiness, and also who are some of the people beyond just the community that voters, or sorry, candidates should talk to as they make this final decision about, is this the right time for me to run or should I wait?
Yeah, and I think that if you're at progressing as a candidate to the point where you're sort of ready to make a hard decision, it's almost the best time. You're 99% of a towards yes, I'm gonna run. It's the best time to really like pump the brakes, bring in your circle, ask some questions of people that maybe you're not as familiar with who have experience in the political space. This is often the time where either, you or I in our before working with goodparty.org would get a phone call saying, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk about this campaign that I'm thinking about? Um, and it's a moment of just reflection and opportunity where a candidate can do a lot of listening, not necessarily a lot of talking, solicit feedback from especially the family about if they're on board with the decision to run and if everyone feels connected to the reason that this person would consider running for office. Um, Talking to folks who might be in the know, who you haven't been connected with yet, there are activists who have large followings online or in person, former elected officials, or even people who are elected to different offices in the community are really great uh, uh, introductions to be made at this stage in the process because you get to learn things about the election that maybe you don't know about, like who else might be thinking about running or um, what the opportunity might look like. Those are all really important things to help shape your decision and put you in a position to have success. And the thing that I always tell candidates that they really want to do when they have made the decision to run is to just be 100% confident that as many of the ducks you can possibly think about that are out there about your campaign are neatly in a row, meaning you feel really confident about the decision you've made. You've thought about the strategies you're going to try and employ, like who your voters might be, the things that they care about. You've valued your family's input. We always tell people at this stage, just make sure the wife and kids, if you have any, are on board, because campaigning, even at the local level, is a commitment for the entire family. And that you've solicited feedback that maybe challenges your own impression of what the experience is going to be like. That way you're informed. And as long as you're informed, I think as a candidate, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to have some of the things that you are making assumptions about tested, but you'll know what you signed up for and you'll feel good about the experience and you'll know what you're trying to learn as you go through the process.
Yeah, this base building period where you're listening to your community, but also sort of building out the kitchen cabinet in some terms is a really pivotal part of the campaign. And I want to lift up a question from the chat that's coming from Cole Talbot, who asks, how would an independent candidate gain the necessary funds to run? And I think this process is a big part of that, Cole. And I'll let Jared give his take on it. But I think in these conversations where you're talking to people about, do you think that I should run? Is there an opportunity for me? This is also the chance to do some of that seed fundraising that you need to get the bare minimum funds that you need to do things like get a website up. And if you feel like there's resistance coming from your community, not the parties or the sort of like political playmakers, but from your friends, your family, the people closest to you, that might be a sign that running for office is something that you need to build a little bit more trust to be able to do. But Jared, what's your take on, especially in the framing of getting a campaign off the ground? How do you secure that seed funding, and kind of how is the why a really big part of that?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think that sometimes the sort of nuts and bolts of a campaign are the immediate afterthought after you've committed to running. So you're running and you're like, oh crap, I need to raise money, I need to hire people, I need to start talking online. It becomes a lot to do really quickly. And so you're thinking about this at the right moment, which is you're considering to run and you're trying to think of all of the things that you need to do. And this is part of the decision-making process. And in terms of especially the sort of prospect of raising money, to Rob's point, he's exactly right. This is a moment for you to essentially test the idea with friends and family, and then there maybe their friends and their family, or people that you went to school with, or whatever it is, whoever's in your immediate and maybe second, ring network, to just ask questions like, "Hey, I'm thinking about running. What do you think about me being a potential candidate?" And you'll be able to test the feedback there. The easiest thing to do in this regard is to honestly just build a list. Like it can be a very simple spreadsheet or write it down on a piece of paper of the 10 people who you would go to first outside of politics to talk about a serious life decision, and then add maybe the next 10 people after that, uh, until you feel like you've sort of hit your cap on the folks that you really have in confidence, and just ask them individually the question about what they if they think it's the right fit for you and what they think about the campaign. And if all of those people are on board, you've got something to build off of, because these are the people who will support you, hopefully, when you choose to run. And you can make the ask of them directly that if I do this, will you help me? Um, and then from there, it's just about building a network, right? Each of those 20 people knows somebody. Hopefully they'll be willing to open the doors. You have to be comfortable asking. That's a big piece of it. I think part of making the decision to run starts with, am I in the right frame of mind, and am I comfortable doing the things that I know I'll have to do to be successful as a candidate? And part of that is making a variety of asks of people, which some folks find more comfortable and easy than others. So the long and short of it is, just start talking to friends and family, engaging their reaction and response to it, and you can take it from there.
Awesome. Well, let's move into talking about how you actually craft a compelling why statement, starting with what are some of the elements that a strong personal narrative should include. And again, Cole, thank you for that question. And everybody else, feel free to chime in with questions throughout as well. But yeah, Jared, what do you think of as core elements to a strong why?
Yeah. It's a story. Your why is your story that helps communicate to people why you decided to do this. And so I think the elements combine your personal values, your experience and the history that has brought you to the point where you'd make a decision, your connection to the community, the problems that you've identified, and the vision that you have to, if you're, especially if you're not necessarily running as an incumbent, the way you would want to change your community. And tying it all together is the sort of the consequences of the election, right? So you would structure it as, hey, I'm Cole, in your example, I'm Cole Talbot. I live in this community. I've been born and raised in this community potentially. I went to school here. These are the things that I care about. This is how I've seen the community change since I've lived here. And this is why I think we need to go in a different direction than maybe the current incumbent council member, because our community has a lot of potential as long as we're able to, right the ship if you and others believe the city is going in the wrong direction. And I would tie in your values, things that you would bring as a public servant into government. And again, specifically ask voters to make a choice. I think the most important piece of a why statement and the most important part of a campaign is framing the choice that voters ultimately will have to make. They're either going to vote for you or they're going to vote for somebody else. And the candidate who uses their why to communicate what that choice is and why they're the best choice is almost always the candidate, in my experience, that has success versus the candidate who, says a lot about themselves maybe, and maybe even a little bit about their opponents, but doesn't make that choice clear in the minds of voters.
Mm. And what role does authenticity play with connecting with voters? And authenticity is a tricky one because you know it when you see it type thing.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about authenticity and how to make sure that your why rings true with voters?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's just about being yourself, right? And you hit the nail on the head, Rob, in that voters, I think, are sort of uniquely as a group attuned to when someone is trying to sell them some BS. And the candidates who try oftentimes are not the candidates who succeed. And so authenticity is everything. It's there's no value, I think, in trying to build a why for somebody else because it's not true to who you are. It's difficult to communicate. It's not going to get you very far. And it's much easier to just look inward and say, hey, here are the things that I care about. Here are my values. Here's why I'm doing this. And reflect that to your community than try and essentially be something that you're not. It doesn't feel good personally, and politically, it's not particularly effective either.
Yeah. Um, how can candidates link personal experiences to these broader voter concerns? We've talked about centering your why around community concerns. You do all that listening sort of at the initial touch point. And let's say, you know what, the number one issue in this neighborhood is that the streets aren't being paved. You drive down the road and it's like going through an obstacle course. How do you tie that to your personal experiences and do
Yeah,
so in an authentic way?
I love this question, Rob, because I think we get from candidates a lot that they're almost sometimes concerned that they don't have the technical expertise for some of the problems that their community is asking them to be solved. So an example here is if you're talking about, roads not being paved, you don't have to be an expert in how to pave a road or what materials go into making a road smooth or how much it costs or who you would need to hire or how you would do it yourself or anything like that. And the same is true for a lot of these very specific problems. You don't have to be a expert in any one, necessarily given fields because representing your community oftentimes is not a one size fits all person or solution. And you're going to face a lot of different problems and challenges. And I think the person who succeeds in tying their sort of personal experience or their life experience into a good campaign, they lean in on the skills that they've acquired and accrued in things like problem solving or in bringing people together, especially if you're, let's say, in a legislative position, right? And not all offices are the same. But if you're working not as a mayor or an executive, but maybe a city council member or a state legislator, the role is to bring people together, to build consensus, to listen to opposing points of view and find common ground, and then work with other people and from other constituencies to arrive at a solution. And you don't have to be a lawyer or a lobbyist or a business person to have those skills. You can be a doctor, you can be a librarian, a chef, you can be, a lot of different things. So more than the technical side, it's what have you learned throughout the course of your life that makes you an effective leader, an effective problem solver, an effective manager of issues, all of those things I would lean more into.
Yeah, I'll share, as I often do when we do these trainings, is a story of one of my favorite local politicians here in my home state of Maine. There was a longtime senator to United States Congress who first was elected to the Maine legislature, the local legislature, named Mike Mishu. And Mike was a mill worker who initially ran because he wanted to clean up the Penobscot River because it was being polluted by the mill that he worked at. And so when he ran, he talked about how, hey, I see this firsthand. So he's offering up personal credentials, right? Like I know what the mill's doing that it shouldn't be doing because I work there. And I want to clean up this river because this is a river that I grew up being able to fish in. And now I don't even dare go swimming in it, let alone eat something that came out of it. And I want to get back to the place where, my kids can fish out of this river. And so he shares his personal credentials, his motivation for running, and also his vision and goal. Like, what will it look like when I've been elected and I've done my job? And then the other piece here is to differentiate yourself from your opponent. So to talk about why you can do something that the current status quo cannot. So those are sort of the elements that I think make up a really strong why. And I think that Mike Mishu campaign is one I've studied for a really long time because I think it was so effective. But Jared, do you have anything else that you want to add about crafting this compelling why before we move into talking about using the why to connect with voters? So sort of final thoughts.
Yeah, I think and we're going to talk about it and how the why sort of takes shape, but I think the exercise is just thinking to yourself over and over again, like, why is this important? Why would anyone care about this? And then what are the different ways that I can communicate, this thing that I think is important to others? And so an exercise I often do with candidates is they'll tell me, I'll ask them the question is, why are you running? And even if it's really clear to me, I'll ask them in their own words, okay, so tell me why is that important to a voter in your community? And it really forces them over and over to think, what is it that I'm trying to communicate? Why should someone else care about this who maybe has never met me before? What maybe isn't clear about what I'm trying to say? Like, how can I make this even more clear? And how can I feel comfortable saying this over and over and over again? And that's something that I think is overlooked is you're going to get asked as a candidate the question, why are you running over and over and over again from people who are meeting you for the first time over the course of your campaign. And your why statement and the way that you frame out the reasons that you're running, it's really important that it's consistent and that the people in your community are meeting the same candidate, no matter if you're on the north side or the south side, or talking to rich people, poor people, whatever it might be. It's like consistency goes to authenticity. And the candidate who tries to be kind of shapeshift into whatever room they're in and fit their why into the situation, I think is the candidate that will find some struggles along the way versus the candidate who knows who they are, why they're running, and is committed to making sure people understand that regardless of the situation that they find themselves in.
Awesome. I'm going to elevate a couple of questions that come out of the chat here. First, is being sick of the fighting a good motivation? So how can you use, partisan gridlock as a message for your why?
Yeah, I think it's a huge contrast. We've seen candidates, hundreds of candidates now, lean into this idea that our political system is broken. And the thing that I think is critical when you talk about this as a candidate is that it is tied back to your community. because I think you can ask any person on this call, you can go down the street and talk to your neighbors. Every single one of them is not going to be for political fighting. I don't think anyone's happy when they see nothing getting done and a lot of people just shouting names at each other. There might be a couple of people who find it entertaining, but at the end of the day, it's not the way that an effective government runs, and I think people broadly understand that. But if you're running for a city council position, right, and you're pointing to Washington as the problem and how nothing is getting done in Washington and our Congress or the president or the Senate is broken, it's not going to trickle down to the office that you're currently running for. So I think that the partisan fighting, like in this example of the campaigns that we brought up earlier in Virginia and in Fairfax City, our candidates had a lot of success specifically saying the partisan fighting from Washington has actually made it down into our city council level. And that's a huge problem because these issues, they aren't partisan. It shouldn't be about Democratic ideas or Republican ideas at a small town level. And yet that's what we have. And that idea really resonated with voters because they wanted something different. But it has to be specific, I think, if you're pointing out the fighting, because it's something that a lot of candidates run on. And I think everyone generally is tired of the fighting going on all over the country politically.
Here's another question from the chat that I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. Me being from Maine, we're pretty prickly about people from away. And so if you're running for office somewhere that you didn't grow up or somewhere that you weren't born, what are some ways that you might tailor your message to overcome that sort of outsider skepticism that you're sometimes faced with?
It's a totally, I think, a situational thing more than anything, Rob. Like, if you are someone who just moved to a new community and the first thing you did, you put up your, you lay down your doormat, and then the very first thing you do is run for office, I think you're opening yourself up just candidly to questions about a community that maybe is wondering why someone who isn't more ingrained in the community is running for office. And this is an opportunity, like these are good questions to ask this early, potentially in a campaign cycle, because nobody wants to be the person who only finds out 2 weeks before the election that folks are pissed off that they're running in the first place. But for people who, are not necessarily in that egregious of an example, like you just moved and the first thing you do is run for office, the thing I tell them all the time is that, you can't really choose where you were born, but you can choose where you live. And I do think that that's something that resonates with people. If you decided to move somewhere, you probably did it for a reason. And telling the story of what motivated you to move to a community is something that I think a lot of people who weren't born and raised there, and even people who were, will relate to. You probably were evaluating the schools or the quality of the housing market or the job opportunities, the safety of the community, the nature. There are a lot of factors, right, that people think about when they are going to resettle somewhere. And your neighbors probably had that same conversation at some point. And especially if things are going in the wrong direction, they're probably concerned that they're either going to have to move too or that they're scaring other people away. And so I think leaning into what made your specific community special, what made you want to move there in the first place, and now what makes you want to serve as a leader in this community, it's something that can be powerful.
Yeah, Mainers are prickly enough about this issue that there's a saying that you can move kittens into an oven and it doesn't magically make them into biscuits, which is a terrible saying. But I have also seen people very successfully run for office, and a couple of key phrases that I've hung on to, just sort of remembering people diffuse this, is by saying, I didn't have the good fortune to be a Mainer by birth. But I'm a Mainer by choice.
Yep.
I moved here. I had my children here. I raised my children here. I started my business here. So you can credential yourself as a part of that community and speak to the value that the community has to you. And so just a +1 on everything that Jared had to say there, but some good anchor phrases for you to pull off of as well. And thank you guys. All really good questions coming up in the chat. So keep those coming. Let's talk about connecting your story to your vision. How can candidates articulate their vision for the future while keeping it grounded in that why, tying it back to why they ran for office in the first place?
How can candidates sort of articulate their vision? I
Yeah,
think,
their vision for the future.
yeah, I think that this is where I encourage candidates to lean into contrast, right? Because and we have an exercise that is available through the goodparty.org tool that our AI that you'll see in a little bit can help you walk through. But it really is about understanding the choices that people have had to make in previous years and the sort of lived experience that they're currently having. And then building your vision off of contrast if you are running against sort of the status quo or maintaining it, in the case of being an incumbent, right? If you're an incumbent, your whole pitch to voters is everything is going great. Let's send me back so I can continue doing the good work. But in most cases, as an organization, we tend to work with people who are challenging incumbents, and their vision is almost, has to be by definition a different and future focused and oriented pitch to their community. And how you ground that in your why is either by looking at how things were and the times that things were good, or by saying, look, our community has maybe suffered for a really long time. We've tried to do the same thing over and over and over again and experienced the same poor results. And I'm running to be a solution to that and to offer something that our community really needs. And that's where you can ground it in issues, right? You're starting with this idea that your values are that the community can be better off if we just make a choice, and you care about the community and here's why, and then you can lend into solutions, whether it's schools, safety, healthcare, businesses, children, whatever it is.
Yeah. Storytelling is such a powerful tool. What are some effective ways to address concerns by using this type of storytelling tied to your why?
I think that an effective story, especially along the way, right? You're communicating concerns that you're hearing from people back to them almost before they even have a chance to raise them. And as a good candidate will be very attuned to the concerns of their community because they've put themselves out there to hear those concerns. And I think candidates are oftentimes really successful when they address those concerns head on, right? Like clear the air and let people understand that you share their concerns or you're with them, or you understand, even if you don't share the concerns exactly, what is concerning them, right? And it puts you on the same place and plane as your community, which is delivering empathy, and being empathetic in addition to authentic is a hugely important and a distinguisher for a successful candidate. And so I think as you campaign and as you speak to more people in your community and you hear those concerns, weaving those concerns into your why, oftentimes telling stories, you'll hear, I'm sure, many politicians, if you've been around the campaign space, sometimes they don't do it so authentically. But a lot of candidates are basically trained to say, I met this person on the campaign trail and let me tell you their story and their concerns. And sometimes, again, it might sound a little phony, but if you're doing it authentically, it humanizes your vision and it helps people understand that you're putting yourself out there, doing the work, you're listening to people, especially at the local level where people probably know everybody. They understand that this campaign isn't just about you. You're running to help others. You're running because you've listened to others. You are building your campaign off of something bigger than yourself and your own sort of concerns and interests.
A phrase I'm sure you've bumped into over the years, Jared, on the campaign trail is the best story wins. So,
Yeah.
how can candidates prepare for when their narrative is challenged by their opponents?
That is the job of your opponent too, right? I mean, your opponent's job will be to say and frame themselves in their why in their most positive light and try and poke holes in your story and do it civilly, hopefully. Your job is the same, is to make sure that your why is up for some scrutinization and you understand exactly what it is you're trying to communicate and display contrast against your opponent. And so I think there are times where your opponent, if you're running against someone obviously who is really organized, will try and poke holes in your story, and it almost gives you opportunities to engage and say, hey, listen, we're sort of two sides of the same coin on certain issues. And if someone says, hey, they're wrong, like, this candidate, they're running for a reason that I don't resonate with, and I'm the incumbent, and I think that they're wrong on this issue. In a way, it can give you additional motivation to say, look, this incumbent is going to keep things exactly as they are. And then for voters, the choice is just, do you care about my side of the issue or my opponent's? And if you're the better storyteller and you're able to poke holes in maybe the motivations or the reason that your opponent is kind of coming after you on any given issue, you might have success. So it really is sort of just a how do you frame yourself and tell your story in a way that resonates, and sometimes take the incoming from someone who is trying to run against you to reframe it to reflect your why again back at voters.
Mhm. So that's opponents. Let's talk about engaging with potential supporters and also the people closest to you, your stakeholders. How can candidates test their narrative with their early supporters and advisors kind of at the beginning of the campaign, and use it to evolve what they end up putting in front of a larger number of voters as the campaign goes on?
Yeah, we have a great tool for that. And it'll help candidates and their friends and family sort of visualize your why, right? And when we talk about why you're running, it's not just a statement that you commit to memory, but it is also collateral and things that you'll put online or put on yard signs or t-shirts or turn into a slogan or an elevator pitch. You know, your why can kind of come in all different forms and shapes and sizes. The message should be consistent and authentic and empathetic, but you won't always have, 2 minutes to grab someone on the street and tell them why you're running. And so I think that distilling your why into a few different forms is a really valuable exercise. And then forcing yourself out there and talking to people, whether it is, of course, your friends and your family, or other people, other, strangers. The amount of times I've spent on the campaign trail with a candidate in the early stages of the campaign, just walking around in the parks or going to, food courts at the mall and having the candidate go and introduce themselves to someone and just tell them why they're running is more times than I can count. And it's not necessarily the most comfortable experience, especially early in the campaign for some candidates. But it's a really, really like profoundly useful way to get feedback from people who maybe don't already have an opinion about you because you're talking to a stranger. You're saying, hey, I just want to grab you for 30 seconds. I'm running for this local office and I'd like to tell you why. And you're gonna get a reaction, you're gonna get an authentic, honest reaction from that person. And that feedback, hopefully it's positive, but even if it isn't, will be useful in how you shape and approach the next person.
So, well, this feels like a good time to segue into the practical part of the demonstration. So I want to introduce Tevin Bell, or actually ask Tevin to introduce himself. Tevin's a member of our team, is going to walk us through a demo of how our tools can help to make this crafting of a why so much easier. But Tevin, do you want to introduce yourself, say what you do here at goodparty.org, and a little bit about why you joined our team?
Yeah, so hey everyone. I'm a senior product manager here, which some of you might not be super familiar with the job title there, but basically, I talk to a lot of the people who use our tools. I see where their problems are. I see what we can do to kind of help those things, make you all more comfortable and more efficient when running your campaign. And then put those ideas into some screens and some experiences, and work with our development team to help build that stuff. So I'm always open for feedback. If any of you do want to give any feedback after using any of our tools, feel free to contact me. You should be able to find me, or my email is tevin@goodparty.org. Pretty easy one there.
Yeah, Tevin's pretty modest, but he's one of the wizards who helps to build a lot of the really wonderful stuff that we've been able to provide to candidates. So, Tevin, best place to start is how can our AI tools help candidates to be able to build their own why statement?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a particular tool that's going to be great for this, and that's our campaign assistant. This is an AI model that we feed a lot of data into, a lot of stuff that you put into the site, as well as a lot of our own best practices, information about voters, etc. And so it's got a lot of the tools and best practices that you'd need to take hours and hours to read, just built in. So in terms of building out a why statement, I've gone ahead, I've signed up, I've filled out a lot of my details on this particular account. And I can come in here and ask it to help me craft a why statement. So good news here is you don't really have to know why at the beginning of the conversation. You don't have to come in. Ooh. Yeah, you don't have to know why at the beginning of the conversation. You can come in with some fairly vague ideas, or even no real ideas, and have a conversation with it that really helps you clarify and distill it down to your why. So you can see here that I've asked it to help me craft a why statement, and it drafts a why statement, asking me to insert some of my motivations, experience, and goals. So I'm going to actually throw it back on it. Let's say I don't really have much of an idea right now. So I can ask it, based on what you know about me and my positions and my background, create 3 drafts. I'll take a look at those 3 drafts, and then I'll pick the best one for us to keep editing. So I can send that through, and it's got a lot of stuff going on in the background. But one of the real powerful things about something like this is me creating 3 drafts is going to take me a lot of time and energy. It's a lot of brain power to put in. But really, before I'm done speaking here, it'll have thrown out 3 drafts that really incorporate a lot of the information that I've put in as I was signing up here. So you can see here, it's taken a lot of my information. I have some example issues and example background here. It actually correctly flags that I am an immigrant. I was born in South Africa, so I've got that in here for this particular account. And it's got a couple of drafts, and I can read through these, see what I like about each one. You can have it create more, ask it to move in different directions, or have it remix parts. If I like parts of 2 and parts of 3, I can just really easily ask it, almost as if you've got somebody experienced there working with you. The collaboration with these tools is truly astounding, incredible. If anybody's interested, I'd love to nerd out about some of this stuff. Okay, so let's say I prefer number 3. I can ask it questions like, imagine you're a voter in my district. Does the statement help you understand this and understand my end goal? Or, yeah, let's not go overtime too much. Maybe I can say something here about something we've talked about previously on this call. Maybe the office I'm running for, in this case, it's Seattle City Council. Maybe I can say that partisan politics don't belong in local government, and the incumbents are too partisan.
Yeah, so this gets right back to that earlier question about how do you message your why around being sick of the fighting.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's probably because I work here, but that's definitely me. Very sick of
Kevin, while
fighting.
that's loading up, I'll raise up a
Yeah.
question. John asks, is there anything like this in the free version of our tools?
Yeah. This is there in the free version. It's very similar. It just doesn't load up some of your voter data in particular. And that's reserved for the pro version. But in terms of what I'm doing here, you can do this on a free account today if you'd like. So I can see here that it's incorporated the partisan politics divide us. And maybe I like that, or maybe one of the other drafts work out a little bit better. But you can see here, I mean, in the course of 5 minutes, I've gone from not really anything, said, hey, take a look at everything you know about me, give me 3 drafts. I'd like another 3 drafts that include some other piece of information. And now I've got 6 drafts that I can work off. And this really shortcuts the amount of from scratch staring at a blank page that you have to do, which I find, and a lot of people find as well, to be the hardest part of writing. Really just sitting there looking at it and going, oh, I've got all this information. What can I do with it? Okay.
I think one of the
So,
really powerful
yeah.
parts of this too is that once you get your why statement written into this, you can then ask the AI to generate um, communication tools based on this, right? Like you could ask it, okay, based on this why, generate me a door knocking script or a phone texting script, or what are some of the other pieces of content that we help people to generate off of this, Tevin?
Yeah. So, lots of things. Interview prep, speeches, all of the scripts you mentioned, social copy, website copy. And just for a bit of quick example here, um, maybe I want to take this and turn it into a website blurb and a social post. Let's say this is a social post for Facebook. Um, and I can keep going with this iterative approach and have it build out lots of different things with this. Or maybe you want to see how a certain why statement turns into some of these things. And if you're not super happy with how it translates into a blurb or maybe a social post, you can go back and start to rework some of the drafts. And it gives you a great starting point because, I mean, I just had 3 drafts here, but you can just as easily do 5, 10. So there's a lot of brain power you get out of this. So you can see here, turns it into a little blurb for my website or a social post for me, complete with some hashtags.
Awesome. And then lastly, what are some ways that candidates can leverage voter data to understand their community in creating a more informed why statement with
Yeah.
these tools?
So I've gone ahead and I've taken a look at my voter data and downloaded it, and then just thrown it up into Google Drive. And I took a look at how some of the splits work in the particular district that the data I downloaded came from. So you can see here that the district that I'm running for is majority Democrat, tends younger, is mostly women, and mostly people of European descent with a decent Asian community, East and South Asian community. So I can take that back. I mean, 4 really, really easy charts based off of the voter data that you can get from us. And I can go and start to plug stuff like this in. Hey, I'd like this to resonate a little bit more with younger voters or older voters. And you can really take anything that you find in here that seems like it would be helpful. So maybe my core base is going to be more left-leaning, younger people. And I can go put that back into the AI and really start to tailor that message a little bit more.
This is, we talk about understanding your community and going out and going to coffee shops, talking to friends, talking to family, you get a lot. But when you see the entire community, and sort of the political data that sometimes is really hard to access and that we make available through the pro subscription for $10 a month, it adds a layer of understanding to your community that maybe you wouldn't get from asking questions of people, in less political terms, right? And so this whole thing is just an exercise in helping candidates understand the role that they're potentially going to walk into and marrying it to their community. And so we help candidates understand, like Tevin was alluding to, right? If you live in a community where Democrats outnumber Republicans and nonpartisan voters 3-1, that is information that's good to know before you commit to running for office, and it helps you shape and understand and make assumptions about maybe the concerns that the community has. And if you have really conservative values and principles, nothing wrong with it, but you might be in for a bumpy ride if you're running in a community where the community is very progressive. And we've seen candidates, fall into that situation and then they're surprised. And they'll say, well, I didn't know that my community was 80% conservative and I'm very progressive, this is a problem that the voter data would solve right away. So we encourage candidates not to necessarily wait until you're already off to the races. The voter data is relatively inexpensive, again at $10 a month versus what sometimes is hundreds, if not thousands of bucks for candidates who are running within sort of the two-party infrastructure. And you learn a lot about your community and it helps you become a better informed and more educated candidate.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that demo, Tevin. We're going to open it up for the next 10 to 15 minutes to Q&A and kind of make this a free-for-all to wrap up the call. So whether you have questions about the tools specifically or just generally for Jared as our expert on shaping your why here, please feel free to drop those into the chat and I'll start teeing those up for people. So Jermaine asks, how do you get access to voter data if you haven't filed yet and you want pro access?
It's a good question, Jermaine. So right now we have a sort of a check in place to make voter data available to candidates who have filed. We can talk offline about how we can potentially get you access. The trick is we have to essentially know that you're planning on running if you haven't run already. There are some strict rules about getting access to voter data and its applications, and it's mostly for candidates. So we can talk. I'm happy to sync up with you offline and we can talk through the process and talk about your hopefully soon to be campaign as well.
Awesome. Cole had asked earlier about centering a why statement around if just wanting to help people. He talked about how he wanted to be a doctor at one point, or how that's something he's working towards. Yeah, what are some of the ways that you can use your desire to help people as an authentic why?
I think that's a core value. Cole, I saw you ask the question earlier, and I apologize we missed you the first time, but I think that if your core value is wanting to help people and to take care of people, that's a really valuable thing to communicate to voters in your community. Even talking about not knowing if you ended up becoming or in the process of learning to become a doctor. But it's all part of a story, right? If you've always wanted to be a doctor since you were young, maybe you're in med school, maybe there's a reason that you decided to change course. It was all inspired around the idea of hopefully trying to help people and help take care of people. And I think that that's a core motivation that sounds like is inspiring you to consider looking at running for office too. And I think that that's something that people should know and understand about you and understand that that's how you view the world and your place in it.
And I think as well, that gives you a great opening and opportunity to ask people in your community what they need help with and start to gather some of those pieces of information that will really resonate with those voters, whether that's infrastructure, school funding, whatever you start to see pop up most, gives you a very grounded way to say, okay, I've spoken with the community. Here's what it seems like people need help with. And that's a great way to sort of craft a platform that resonates really well with them.
Awesome. I see Lisa says she understands mailers can be secured or generated with goodparty.org. Are those sent direct to the candidate, or can those simply be handed out or mailed? I'll say mail is one of the most important parts of campaigning to get right. The only thing that can go into a mailbox is actual registered posted mail. And if you put like a campaign flyer into a mailbox, you're subject to a fine, and you're subject to a fine for every single piece that is placed in a mailbox. So it is a dangerous compliance piece. One of the most important things to train your volunteers on when they're handing out or putting out door hangers is not to put mail, things that aren't mail into mailboxes. But Jared and Tevin, can you talk a little bit about how goodparty.org can help with mail content and with mail as a whole?
I just will start by echoing Rob. Mailers that a candidate or volunteers are putting direct in mailboxes is a big no-no. You very much want to avoid doing it. This has come up a few times, and Rob and I both, our eyebrows are like, don't, make sure you haven't already done it. So the moving past that, we're working with different tactics. You know, mail is a terrific way to get out the vote and to really target voters. We have a few tools on the platform right now that we use to go direct to voters. Things like peer-to-peer text messaging, robocalling. We have a partnership with a terrific vendor called eCanvasser that we make available to candidates at no cost that helps them knock on doors. And we're frequently and constantly throughout the year going to be adding new and additional ways for candidates who are upgraded to the pro tier to reach voters. Right now, there is no like direct mail application through goodparty.org. It's on our short list to add to it. And what we envision would be, I think what you were describing, Lisa, where a candidate can come in, use our AI tools to design and to produce the copy and the content for their mailer, pick the voters that it's going to go to, and then it would get connected to a mail house because mail houses are the only ones who can actually mail the pieces to households and get it out the door. We're not quite there yet. It's on our short list of things that we are working on. But what we can do in the interim is we can help you use the AI to write the mail script, the mail copy. We can help you pull the voters at the household level, right? So you don't need to mail necessarily every single voter. You only need to send one piece per household. And then we have a partnership and a network of partners with different mail houses and vendors who we can connect you with if you're urgently trying to get a piece of mail out the door to help you throughout the process, because it can be a tricky one to navigate if you've never done it before. And how long does it take to receive campaign materials once finalized? It sort of depends. I think if you're still talking about mail, typically it's about a 1 week process. So you send the final copy and the voter file to a mail house. They'll print the pieces of mail, they'll send it out, and then depending on where they're going and where people live, it can take about a week for a postcard to arrive in someone's mailbox.
I really love this question. What strategies can you use to make your why statement, or to make sure that your why statement inspires action and not just understanding?
It's a great question. Can you tell me that one more time? I need a second.
Yeah. What strategies can you use to make sure that your why statement inspires action and not just understanding?
What can you do to make your why statement inspire action? Great question. And I think that the trick in many ways is to add a call to action at the end of your why.
Yeah.
And that's a cheeky response, but it is the truth. I think that when you get someone to the point where they've listened to your values, they've listened to your story, they understand why you're running, they understand the choice and the contrast, and you've got the person right there, the worst thing to do is to let them off the hook and say, okay, nice to meet you, I'll see you around. They might ask you and you might get lucky and they'll say, how can I stay in touch with you? But the candidate who is going to build a base of volunteers or funders or supporters or voters is going to make an ask of people. And so I often will have candidates include in person or on their materials, go to visit my website and sign up. Or if you want to volunteer, I'm going to put you in touch with someone who can help you, who's helping us organize volunteers. Or if you want to fundraise, here's how we're going to be raising money. And the single catch-all that can kind of get all of those things is here's how you can help. Or here's my ask for you is, can you help support my campaign in any way that you're comfortable? And then you can offer them some choices.
Yeah, I love this question. And I think it's kind of interesting where your why is best used as how you're converting on a call to action. So you can almost start from the call to action first, right? And this is a fun way to play around with the AI tools that we were demonstrating. So okay, use my why statement to craft a fundraising appeal, use my why statement to create a persuasion script, use my why statement to make a volunteer appeal. Because ultimately, like, one of the main things that a candidate does is that they ask other people to do things. Jared and I sometimes joke that you're the asker in chief if you're a candidate. So you're either asking people for their time, via volunteerism, you're asking people for money so you can afford to run a campaign, or you're ultimately asking voters to come out and vote for you, right? And so all those different asks, if you can tie your why into how you wind up to make that ask, you're using your why in the right way. Another question here, does goodparty.org have volunteers to help build a website? We have in our Discord a group of volunteers in a design team who have done a lot of work to help offer feedback around building websites, particularly on the branding side. So if you're not in our Discord already, please join the Discord and you can make requests to the volunteers who are there. There are about 3,000 people in our Discord currently, and we're growing that community every day. So you'll be able to put that ask directly in front of the volunteers who hopefully can help you. And I think definitely helping to build out better resources around campaign websites is on our frequently requested feature list. So we hear you loud and clear there. Quinn, our colleague, just dropped a link to joining the Discord. It's really easy. It takes about 5 minutes, and it's a great place to get peer-to-peer support as well as have say about what types of trainings we do in this space every 2 weeks. So thank you for that. And this feels like a good place to stop for the evening. Our next training is in 2 weeks. It is on building an effective campaign plan. So you decided that you're going to run for office. You've got your messaging and your why. Now let's build the plan to put your best message in front of the right voters over the course of your campaign cycle. And that building an effective campaign plan training is on February 6th. So we hope to see all of you come back for that. You'll be able to ask questions ahead of time if you join in the Discord and help us to shape the actual curriculum of the training that we're putting together. So by all means, please join the Discord as well. And if you have any further questions, any pieces of this that you want to go a little bit deeper into, feel free to reach out. We'll be sending a follow-up email with a recording of this, as well as a survey to give us feedback on how this training went, so we can continuously be improving them and to give you the ability to offer both feedback and follow-up for us. So thank you, everyone. This was a lot of fun. We look forward to be doing this again every 2 weeks this year. Have a great one. And